Good afternoon, everybody. We are going to continue with our technical program today. For those of you who have yet to see my face or see me running around the conference, my name is Alexandra Squires. I'm a project coordinator with Newfound Gold Corp and one of your co-chairs for the technical program here this year. For our next session, it's part of our insight, our entire insight session, and this is focusing on advanced exploration. And without further ado, I will invite Fiona Childe, the VP of Communications and Corporate Development of Newfound Gold, to present on the Queensway project. Aaron's just getting, he should be just right there. I don't know, right, maybe, but you have a timer there. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You have to do
All right, and then you have a hook for me, right?
I have already given someone that, so, yeah.
Okay, fairly worn then. All right, hi everybody. Nice to be here at my first Central MinEx. It usually snows this time of year here, right? Just checking. Okay, so really what I'd like to do is provide an update on our Queensway Gold project since the last time we presented here last year. I'll let you read this at your leisure, but just suffice it to say I'll be making forward-looking statements today. So a lot has gone on with the company in the last 12 to 14 months. So before we presented here last year, we had just put out the initial mineral resource estimate on the project, and much more since then. 74,000 meters of drilling last year, a preliminary economic assessment, robust, for the Queensway Gold project in July. Phase 3 metallurgical test work, and that metallurgical test work and engineering work is ongoing. Expansion of our property, we now have over 220,000 hectares of land. We appointed a project finance advisor to help us to acquire the funds we would need to be able to develop Queensway. We entered into a Phase 1 EPCM contract with WSP Canada, and as part of that, we made the selection to go forward with expanding our own Pine Cove mill to use for Phase 1. So that was another corporate advancement, of course, was the maritime transaction to acquire the Hammerdown Gold Project and the Pine Cove mill. We now have our 2026 drill program underway with 4 rigs currently turning. And earlier this week, we announced a $205 million project finance package. That's a combination of debt and equity to secure the funds that we need to be able to put Queensway Phase 1 into production. So I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about the PEA. As I said, we released that last July. And what we did is originally we looked at a more conventional type approach that you would see where you'd build simply a 5,000 or 7,000 ton per day operation on site with a significant capex. That capex would have been a multiple of our market capitalization at the time. So what we did instead is we stepped back and we said that this deposit has a high-grade core that comes to surface, and there are mills on the island within a few hundred kilometers of Queensway. So let's take a novel approach. Let's start small, use the funding with a low capex to be able to provide the funding to build a larger on-site mill. So that's what we did. So Phase 1 of the project, where we're targeting first production at the end of next year, is a 700 ton per day operation. But although relatively small in terms of the size of the tonnage, it's very high grade, averaging almost 10 grams per ton over that Phase 1 open pits, and so producing almost 70,000 ounces a year. What we'll see is that because of the high cash flows from that operation, it will fund the building of our larger Phases 2 and 3. So Phase 2 is the broader open pit mine at Queensway, and along with that, a large on-site mill. And then Phase 3 is the relatively minor underground component right now, but we really like that one because we think it has excellent potential to expand. It all started with the initial MRE, mineral resource estimate, last year. So the resource, the first resource, and I always like to stress, we view this very much as the initial resource, the first pin in terms of how much gold there is at Queensway, about 1.4 million ounces in the indicated category, and a further 600,000 ounces in inferred. So it's a high quality resource. About 70% of an initial resource in the indicated category is almost unheard of. We had excellent conversion over to the mine plan and the PEA. So of those MRE, we took about 1.5 million ounces over into the PEA mine plan. So what we're looking at here is the production profile over a current 15-year mine life. So as I said, with this phased approach, we have low initial CapEx, $155 million Canadian as the initial CapEx. As I mentioned earlier this week, we've secured $205 million in terms of project finance. The key to the project is that the high cash flows from phase one, which is about 69,000 ounces a year, that will fund phases 2 and 3, which will unlock about 172,000 ounces per year over years 5 to 9. So if we zoom in here and look at the production profile, the dark blue bars that you're seeing, that's phase 1, so the off-site milling at Pine Cove. And with that, we're at about 69,000 ounces a year for those first 4 years. The first 2 years, very high-grade material, over 12 grams per ton going to the mill. The light blue bars, that's phase 2. That's the larger open pits. And then the heart of that operation in terms of what we have outlined right now in the resource base, that's about 172,000 ounces a year. And that includes the gray bars, that's phase 3, the relatively minor underground component where we see great growth potential. So what we'd like to do is continue to explore the land package as we advance the AFC core area, the area where we did the PEA, with the ultimate objective of staying at this higher, approximately 170,000 ounce per year threshold over the life of mine. It's a pure gold project, so we have very high leverage to the gold price. The PEA was done just in July of last year, but people are already pointing out it's out of date in terms of gold price. So our base case gold price was $2,500 US gold. The upside case was only $3,300 US gold. So out of date in terms of the current gold price environment, but at that upside case, what we're seeing is an IRR of almost 200% and an NPV of 1.45 billion. So a very robust gold project, whatever gold price you pick. Our development schedule is tight. We are moving forward quickly with this project. So with phase 1, we're just moving into the EA permitting stage right now, and our objective is to see first gold pour from the expanded Pine Cove mill from Queensway at the end of next year. At the same time, we'll be moving along the permitting and the engineering work for our larger phases 2 and 3, with the objective of building that on-site mill at Queensway and seeing first gold pour at the Queensway mill in 2031. Looking at the work that we've been doing over the last year, first off, let's start with that drilling. As I said, over 74,000 meters of drilling, and we divide that really into what we call project drilling and exploration drilling. So 3/4 of the drilling last year was pre-development work. So that was upgrading the resources, primarily focusing on the upgrade for phase 1, as well as doing all those pieces that we need for mine planning, the hydrogeological, the condemnation, the geotechnical drilling. And then part of that was some very interesting grade control drilling that we'll look at the results for in a moment. And then 25% of our drilling last year was the blue sky, was the true expansion, the exploration drilling. And one of those targets we were drilling last year was Dropkick. We put out some nice results on that this morning, and I'll get to that in a moment. This year, we've got 4 rigs currently active. When that snow does finally decide to leave, we'll be ramping it up to 6 rigs and then evaluating expanding the program further. Again, with the primary focus being on the resource area and the PEA area, and the secondary focus being on exploration. Over the last several years, the company has embarked on an excavation program, or previously known as a trenching program. So what we've done is we have these high-grade zones coming almost to surface, just with a shallow overburden. So we've gone in and we've cleaned those off so that we can get in there and map and sample the zones. And then after we've mapped and sampled them, we've done channel sampling at 7.5 meter spacing, and that channel sampling along with the drill results can feed into our mineral resource estimates. And then following the channel sampling, we've started this grade control, tightly spaced 5 by 5 meter grid spacing drilling. The first zone that we exposed was the Keats zone. So that was done, I believe, 2023, with the results out in 2024 from the channel sampling. Last year, we finished cleaning off the iceberg excavation. We released the results of the channel sampling from there. And then last year, we also cleared off the Lotto excavation up to the north, and the results from that zone are still pending. This is incredibly valuable information for us in a structurally hosted orogenic system to be able to actually see and map the geology and get better sampling, as opposed to working just from drill results. We've had a big regional exploration program in recent years as well. So last summer, through the summer and the fall, we had a large regional program with a camp down in Queensway South, and we got some very good results from that work, and we're continuing to do that regional work even through the winter. You can see pictures of the team here on site with their snowshoes on, out there collecting soil samples through the winter. And the goal of that is to really develop additional targets, and I'll take you through some of the results from that and what it looks like in the FireFly slides in a moment. So jumping into FireFly and zooming into Newfoundland, the yellow is the Queensway land package, again, 220,000 hectares, so a significant land package. Here are some of our neighbors on the island, many of which are at the conference here. And then we're zooming right into Queensway. So we have 110 kilometers of strike extent on two major structures, the Appleton and the JBP. These don't host mineralization, but instead they're the conduits for mineralization, where we have mineralization forming adjacent to those faults in secondary and tertiary structures. We're looking now at the AFZ core area here. This is the area that we did the PEA on, where the majority of our initial mineral resource is hosted. Here now we're looking at the conceptual pit shells for the three main zones, Keats, Iceberg, and Keats West. And then the bright colors you're looking at in each pit is the block model for the resource. So first off, you can see the resource in each pit is very tightly held together. It's not dispersed throughout each pit. And what we're looking at here is down to the 0.3 gram per ton cutoff in green. So that's the cutoff for an open pit. But when we take away that lower grade material and we just look at what we've got above 2 grams per ton, and 2 grams per ton cutoff would then be the orange in here, what we see in each of the zones is a very coherent high-grade core. Whoops, there we go. So you can see, first of all, that you've got these mineralized chutes extending through each of the pits, and those don't stop at the bottom of the pit. As we move forward, we'll see that they actually extend down, and that's the underground component. And you can also see that these zones really basically just come right up to surface, and you can see it very well here in Keats as well as in Iceberg. So as I mentioned, the excavation program, this is modeling on top of the block model. What we're looking at is the excavations for Keats and Iceberg, each one over 200 meters in length, 70 to 100 meters in width. This is in the Iceberg excavation, and this is where you can see the gold mineralization hosted within that quartz vein. And as you walk along the vein, you can see the coarse free gold within the vein. That's the type of material that we will be taking in phase 1 up to the Pine Cove Mill. Just to give you a flavor for some of the types of results we've been getting, this is at the Iceberg excavation. This is that 7.5 meter space channel sampling. So again, we're seeing very good grades over very good widths throughout this zone. And then if we step back and we look at this 5 by 5 meter space grade control drilling, again, very consistent high grade values have been returned from the work that we've done so far. This is in the Iceberg excavation, and then popping over to the Keats excavation. Again, the market loved these results. We weren't all that surprised. These are consistent with the drill results that had been done, but they really reminded the market of the consistency in terms of widths and high grades. This is the type of material that will be our first year of production from the Pine Cove Mill. So again, high-grade material. And then finally, as I mentioned, we'd also cleared off the Lotto excavation. We've completed the channel sampling there, and we should have the results from that out soon. We're looking in this year's program to continue to expand that grade control drilling, so likely we'll be doing more on Iceberg, potentially more on Keats, and then going up to begin that work in Lotto as well. From there, we're stepping back to look at the mine plan. This would be the series of pits that would be within the phases 1 and 2. Beside us to the white is the Trans-Canada Highway. The red line are the power lines coming right through the middle of the project. So we need to get those power lines moved, and we're working on that one. At depth, as I mentioned, we have a relatively minor component from the underground, but what we really like is that all the underground zones are open to depth, so excellent potential. And then we've done some deep drilling, and we've hit mineralization, the structure in the quartz vein, down to 1.1 kilometers. So we really do feel there's excellent depth potential on the project. I know I'm running short of time, so I'll just take you 11 kilometers to the north up to the Dropkick area. We really got hold of this and started the drilling just as the database was closing for our initial mineral resource estimate. So Dropkick isn't in the mineral resource estimate right now at all. We'll be looking to add that in the next iteration. The values at the bottom were the 2024 drilling, some very nice numbers. Gold were earlier released from last year, so from 2025, and then the blue values were the ones that came this morning. So what we're seeing is that we've got 1.4 kilometers of strike extent. We followed this zone to 300 meters. It's open in all directions except the surface, and what we're seeing is mineralization on both sides of the Appleton Fault, just as we're doing down in the AFC core area. So this target area is developing nicely. We'll be going back to do more work. And then if we step back to the regional scale, what we're looking at here to locate you, again, this is the resource area in the AFC core. This is Dropkick up here. These are grab samples. The red is plus 3 grams per ton gold. The magenta is plus 10 grams per ton gold, and we've got interesting values all the way along the Appleton and the JBP. So these warrant further follow-up work as well. And then, finally, we jump down to the south, 65 kilometers to the south in our Queensway South property. We did a large regional program last year through the summer and the fall. We're getting some very, very interesting mineralization coming there, and we plan to go in and do additional work this year and in the coming years. So to wrap up and looking ahead, 2026 drill program is underway, 4 rigs now, 6 to come in short order. Primary focus, again, continuing on project drilling. So at this point, we're going to go into upgrading the resources for phases 2 and 3. We will also continue with our very successful grade control drill program. We will be stepping out to do regional work as the snow clears. We're also, along with this, moving forward rapidly with the phase 1 permitting process. We should be having some news out on that in the next weeks and months. Our EPCM work in terms of the engineering that we need for Queensway Phase 1 and the expansion of the Pine Cove Mill is progressing very well. And then in about September or so of this year, we'll be doing an updated mineral resource estimate, and along with that, an updated technical report. So a lot going on. I look forward to fielding questions. I'll be around this afternoon or at drinks this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fiona. Up next, as part of our Advanced Exploration Insight session, we have Crispin Pike, VP of Exploration from FireFly Metals, to talk about the Green Bay Copper Gold Project. Go forward, go back, point.
Thank you so much.
Very simple. Thanks.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm sure a lot of you took in Gus's talk this morning about the project and the project development that we'll be working through on our Green Bay Copper Project. I'm going to be speaking to our regional exploration work. So as I've been introduced, my name is Crispin Pike. I'm the Vice President of Exploration, and I'm a geologist. So here's some forward-looking statements. I'm sure you're all aware of where Bay Verde is. Of course, it's kind of been the mining mecca in Newfoundland for over 100 years now. So we are located on the Bay Verde Peninsula, and as Gus pointed out earlier, we've taken over the historic Rambler project, and we're looking to expand this. FireFly took the project about 2.5 years ago, and when we did, a lot of the ground surrounding our assets weren't consolidated. So the team did a really good job of consolidating the ground packages. And really, we have three land packages. One would be in and around Ming Mine, which we call Ming Regional. That's about 12 kilometers by 12 kilometers. And then a year after our acquisition of the Ming project, we did an option agreement with Signal Gold to acquire the Till Cove project. And the Till Cove project, of course, hosts the past producing mines, the historic ones at Betts Cove, but also the more modern mining that was conducted at Till Cove, which took out 10 million tons at extremely high copper grades. And also we have the past producing Whalesback and Little Deer copper gold mines on the Springdale Peninsula, and we also have a regional package there as well. Why these make sense? It's not just that they're spatially linked, but they're also very similar deposits. They're hosted in the same type of rocks, and there's different types of VMS deposits in Newfoundland and Labrador. Of course, the Buckens ones are the ones that people really think and focus on, and those are rich in all base metals, copper, lead, zinc, gold, and silver, whereas the deposits that we have are of a different type, and they're really just copper and gold. And of course, what better time to be working in these commodities is right now, with copper prices at an all-time high, $6 right now, and everyone is aware of the price of gold. So it's a great time for us, and all of these land packages have significant potential for the discovery of new copper deposits. I think it's really interesting when you look at the history of copper production and exploration in Newfoundland and Labrador. There was really just two phases. The initial phase would have been in the late 1800s when the Cornish miners came over from England and hand mined a lot of these, but they were really on the right track. They discovered the majority of the zones that we are aware of today. And then there was a big push in the 50s, 60s, and into the 70s for copper mining in Newfoundland and Labrador, and that's where you saw production at mines like Till Cove, Main Mine and East Mine, which is proximal to Ming, and on the Springdale Peninsula with Whalesback and Little Deer. None of these deposits were small, and none of this production was small. These were, shaft-operated underground modern mining with mills, and tailing facilities throughout the province. Obviously, they didn't do the best job on their ESG, but that was a long time ago, and we're going to be moving much more further. But if you look at what we've done with Ming, to come in and really focus on the VMS exploration in Newfoundland, Labrador through a copper-gold lens, and the amount of value we've been able to add in such a short period of time, we're looking to replicate that with elsewhere in some of the past-producing copper assets that we have. So we have 8 past-producing copper assets in our portfolio. When Ming was being mined in the 60s and 70s by Rambler Consolidated, it was actually a satellite deposit to Main Mine. Main Mine is a VMS deposit across the highway, and Ming North and South are the VMS lenses. They come to surface, but the bulk of our zone actually is a little bit blind, as I'll show you in the next cross-section. But there's so much opportunity just in and around in the brownfields exploration within our past producing portfolio, but also in the greenfields, which we can talk to. So this is a cross-section through our Ming deposit, and I just wanted to touch on what has been done, because I think it's just an incredible story, and we've only had the asset less than 3 years. When we came, the resource was around 30 million tons in the Ming resource, and Juan Gutierrez, our chief geologist, and his team has just done an incredible job to quickly add resource and to grow our company. So, we acquired the asset out of receivership for $70 million, and right now we have a $1.65 billion market cap in less than 3 years, and it's all been with the drill bit. It is incredible story to be able to add this kind of volume of copper and gold into resource in such a short period of time. So basically, we did our first resource estimate after a year of drilling, and we added 20 million tons at over 2% copper. And just to compare for Newfoundlanders, being a kid growing up in Newfoundland during the discovery of voids, I measure everything in ovoids. So the ovoid is 30 million tons. So in that first year, we had 20 million tons of high-grade copper mineralization. And then last year, we updated our resource again, and we added another 20 million tons. So that's 40 million tons at over 2% copper that were added in 2 years, all with the drill bit. And that's what's really grown the value of the company. And it's an immense amount of work, and it was really what unlocked it was the underground development that supported it. So we've done over 2 kilometers of underground development, as you can see, out into the hanging wall. Past owners of the deposit they didn't have the angles to test the mineralization. So, you know, it was a big undertaking to put in a 2-kilometer exploration drift, but allowed us to have those angles to accurately drill out the deposit. And the geology really cooperated with us as well. It's one thing to have faith in it, but it's another thing when you start to pull it out of the tubes. So here's a look at the mineralization. And of course, one thing that we have noticed as we've started to drill deeper is that the grades are increasing. And also, just very briefly, you know, we have the high-grade VMS in the hanging wall, and in the footwall we have the stringer zone, which is also very rich in copper, and that makes up the bulk of our tons. However, as we go down, we've noticed that these zones are culminating, and we have copper, the lower footwall and the high-grade VMS are basically right next to each other. So it's really exciting because it allows us to define a high-grade core, which is really, you know, about 20 million tons at 3.8% copper equivalent. So within our deposit, within the 71 million tons that we have in the deposit, there's a high-grade core that we've drilled out and added to resource that's 20 million tons at that real high grade, and that'll feed into Gus's presentation on how we can add value quickly with the bypass decline. So that's what's been going on at Ming Mine. Of course, the deepest hole that we've drilled to date, from the very end of our exploration development, kind of like a long bomb. We shot that one out last year, and we hit 49 meters at 6.1% copper equivalent, and there's no other holes around it. So that's the deepest hole that we have, and we know that the mineralization still continues at depth. So if we just zoom out now to, you know, this is the scale bar here, there's a kilometer, and we can kind of see the main trend. And these deposits that are close to Ming all sit on the same geological contact between the Ordovician cover sequence and then, of course, the Rambler rhyolite, which is associated with the ophiolitic rocks. And the geology is just amazing here, and everyone's been to the tablelands and Gross Mourne. So it's basically the same story, the oceanic crust that's been abducted, and what came along with all the beautiful mantle rocks that you see at the tablelands are these high-grade copper VMS deposits that sit right directly on top. So this geological contact hosts the main mine and East Mine, which was mined in the 60s and 70s. And we've gone back to look at these, and the exploration was done fairly shallow. There isn't a lot of deep drilling. So some of the drilling that we did last year, you know, we've almost 13 meters at 4.2 grams of gold, 0.5% copper, and 1.5% zinc, and 10 meters at 5.7 grams gold, and with almost 1.5% copper. So this mineralization does continue at depth. Just here's a quick cross section showing those 2 holes, and this is the historic mining that was done at Maine. Very shallow, very small scale mining. But when you compare this to Ming, which what we have done is projected the main mine cross section onto the same cross section as Ming. So this is Ming. This is just all projected to the same plane. Nothing has been shifted. The spatial relationships are there. And this is Main Mine. So this is what was mined at Main Mine. And these are our 2 holes here that we drilled last year. And then you can see the lower footwall doesn't even start at Ming Mine until 200 meters down. So, I've got the slide entitled Tip of the Iceberg, but it truly could be. And we continue to explore not just Main Mine, but all of our past producers in the same manner to try to, replicate the success that we had at Ming and other brownfield sites. Now just to take one more step out and look at the Ming Regional Project as a whole. So what our claim package is basically surrounding the volcanic rocks of the Packet Harbor, and these are the ones that host Ming Mine. And they're very similar to the Till Cove rocks and the rocks in the Springdale Peninsula, where you have a lot of these mafic rocks that host copper and gold mineralization. There's been a lot of really good work done, but as I mentioned, there was really a push for copper and gold exploration in the 1800s, in the 60s and 70s, and then there hasn't been significant exploration for copper and gold through VMS exploration. There's been a lot of work on the peninsula done for orogenic gold, of course, the work that Anaconda did with Pine Cove and the deposits up in the Point Rose, and then, right back from the 80s with Newmont finding Nugget Pond Mine, and then the subsequent work that was done by Signal Gold to identify additional orogenic gold resources. But there hasn't been any significant capital expenditure in VMS exploration really since that push from the 60s and 70s. I mean, like significant capital to do systematic exploration and deep drilling. So there's so much potential for discovery in these rocks. So what we did when we first came was to fly the airborne EM, and there had been frequency domain, older techniques used to highlight conductive trends, but the technology has changed a lot, and I think that's some of the advantages that we have to make a discovery in these rocks. Some of them would be our technology. Of course, we have new geophysics, we have deeper drilling technology, and we have other tools. Another big one is 3D visualization of the data. Of course, we're the first lucky people to get all this data in one spot and spin it around in 3D. The other thing is we have a capital advantage. Our board and our shareholders are very supportive for aggressive regional exploration to drive discovery and turn this into a copper-producing belt and not just a standalone mine at Ming. So it's really exciting time, and our methodologies are heavily focused on geophysics. You can see a lot of the conductive trends that are highlighted on this slide that show strong conductors in volcanic rocks, and that's really a starting point. And then from there, we move on to the ground geophysics. So last year, I think we did more ground EM on the island than anywhere else. We have crews out year-round. We had 40 kilometers of wire on the ground at one time last year, and every hole that we drill, we do borehole EM, and it's really working for us. The mineralization is conductive, but some of it isn't as well, so we're exploring other techniques such as IP to help us drive our target generation. Just briefly on the digital data compilation, there's been a lot of great work done. There's been a lot of great geos that come through these rocks over the last 100 years, and a lot of great ideas that have been captured in the assessment reports. Like I mentioned, it's not that there hasn't been good thinking on these rocks, it's just there wasn't large capital expenditures to drive the discovery. So we get the benefit from all the hard work of all these great geos that did the work, collected the generative surveys like prospecting and mapping and soil geochemistry and early shallow penetrating geophysics, and really never had the resources to properly drill them. So we're generating targets through this, and we hired ALS Goldspot to compile all the data and get it into a usable format, so we can take every drill hole that was ever drilled that was filed for assessment, all the rock chips, and get them into one spot. And then, as I looked at the data that we got back when we did the ALS data compilations for the region, and of course there's years associated with all that data, so you can start layering the data on top kind of decade by decade. And what we've seen with the prospecting, a lot of the prospecting has been done in the exact same places. So you load in the prospecting from the 60s and 70s and then the 80s. And it's really concentrated along the roads, especially in the last 30 years. A lot of the prospecting has been, and like if you look at the scope of the prospecting campaigns, a lot of them been like a day or two on this target, a day or two on this target. So large-scale systematic prospecting, much like what you would, we treat our prospecting crews much like you treat a drill. We do our target evaluation and ranking and prioritization. We pick a polygon in GIS, and then we want the prospecting teams to cover every square inch of that target. So instead of just walking up and down the roads and sampling the same old boulders that Tuak would have found in the 70s, the guys might walk 3 days in the woods and not see a single outcrop, but at least we're testing all the ground, and that's how we're driving discovery through prospecting. And I think, the prospecting for us is as important as the geophysics or the geochemistry. It's really, we're so lucky to be here in Newfoundland and have access to, the best prospectors in the world, in my opinion. And, just to get back a little bit into, you know, the early work that was done in the 1800s. This mineralization was identified, you know, close to the shore in well-exposed outcrops, and, you know, you get the gossinous rocks, the green malachite staining, and you know, the old-timers did an amazing job at sniffing this stuff out and hunting it down. Of course, there was no real, like, Betts Cove Mine is there on the right. That's the actual Betts Cove Mine. Oh. There was very limited production there. I think it was 180,000 tons that came out, and then it caved in. But it just goes to show that they were in the right spot. And our Till Cove belt are, you know, it's different geometries to what we have at Ming. At Ming, it's kind of like a square land package where the volcanic rocks are distributed equally, kind of east, west, and north, south, whereas Till Cove is up on its side, and it's more like a geological belt that we can systematically test. And as I discussed, you know, like, there has been a lot of work targeting the Nugget Pond horizon on top of where the VMS sits by groups like Signal Gold and all the way back to Newmont, but specifically targeting conductive trends hasn't occurred. And this belt hasn't even been flown with airborne EM yet, which is, okay. One more slide here. So we have flown till, how am I doing on time? Is this the last one? Okay. So just to wrap things up, not only are we flying the Till Cove belt with airborne EM to identify conductive trends, but we're also doing the work on the ground. When you do the ground geophysics, you can really target blind deposits like, say, Lawler Lake, which is 500 meters blind, and only was discovered with ground geophysics. And we've had the guys from Jackson's Arm on skidoos all winter. You can see here's our EM coil and the beautiful scenery. And this is our very aggressive ground geophysics program that'll cover all of the Betts Cove complex and hopefully identify excellent drill targets. We've already identified a strong electromagnetic anomaly, very proximal. This is the old Newmont anomaly. You could do a presentation on this on itself, but it was identified in the 80s. We replicated it, and it was never drilled. So we're excited to test also this geology in under the cover sequence. So lots of exciting stuff going on for regional exploration. And hopefully this time next year we can be presenting discovery slides.